Okay, so some new faces, most of them, but I can see some known faces from cognitive science class. How are you? Good? Okay, so we have around 1 hour 45 minutes to talk about a lot of stuff, and we'll have around 10 minutes break in between. You all are which class? BA, first year, second year or third year? Which year? First year? So are you happy with being in first year? Is it tough or okay? Because when we were in first year, we were like, we'll change the world. First year in college, right? Enjoying? You should enjoy first year in college, because third year in college is going to be tough. You will have lots of courses to finish, credits to finish. First and second year you can enjoy, and these courses will help you in enjoying these this year. So we will be talking about metaphors. Anyone who writes poems? Anyone in you who writes poem? No? Anyone who draws is a painter? You are a painter? You also paint? Okay, good. What is the similarity between a poet and a painter? Can you guess? What is the similarity between a poet who writes a poem and a painter who draws and paints? Okay, creative, imagination, both of them inspiration, both of them imagine, get inspiration. One plays with words and the other one plays with colors and lines and orientation and other stuff. So you know how these imagination works for both modalities, and that's what we call modalities. One is the linguistic modality, where poets draw, I would say, and in painting, painters paint. This talk is more about these two modalities, how this creativity, imagination turns out to be metaphorical in different modalities. Look at this example. The student's mind is a bucket and the teacher pours in knowledge. You know what metaphor is, right? Any idea what a metaphor is? Is this a metaphor or something else? Metaphor? You are comparing the mind of a student in terms of a bucket, and the teacher pours in knowledge. So it's poetic, it's creative. You are not simply saying that the teacher is teaching to student. Instead, you are saying that it's a bucket and teacher is pouring in knowledge. This kind of communication is creative communication, and people have been using this creative communication for long, because one reason to use metaphor is it is effective. When you tell this, if you go and tell your girlfriend, I love you, what will happen? If she is already your girlfriend, it's okay. But suppose you are going to a very new girl and a boy and you want to say I love you. Will you simply say I love you? What's new? You would want to tell interesting stuff like, you are my sun, my moon, my stars, you are my beautiful butterfly, and then yes. This is a good way of expressing your love. Simply saying I love you, will you come for a date? It doesn't sound good. This sounds romantic, poetic. So there is some aspect of emotion, creativity, imagination. The other person will think that, oh, you have you have thought about how to propose and all other things. So Anthony tries to impress Bella by comparing her to beautiful things in nature. These kind of expressions, you are my sun. If you simply say to a girl, you are my sun, that means you are saying that you are hot. My moon, a rock. My stars, are you again a sun or a star somewhere millions of miles ahead? You are my beautiful butterfly. Why are we telling this to a girl? There is some mechanism, there is something which is going on in the background, and that's what we are going to understand, what exactly happens. And is this the case with all other modalities? Is it only the case of language, or do we have metaphors in other modalities? So it's not about metaphors, it's something about metaphors. Maybe metaphors is a big domain, you will study it later also. By the way, you are my sun, you can tell this in Europe, because when it's a sunny day, you like it, right? And in Cagliari, when it's sunny summer, people come from all parts of the world and enjoy near beach. I come from a country which is already hot, India, 40 degree. If I tell this to my wife, suppose, that you are my sun, she will kill me. Because sun is not a very good thing in India. If you have lots of sun, every time you have only sun and you get tanned and you are always sweating, sun is not a very good thing. What should I tell? You are a cloudy day. And that she will be happy. Yes, I am a cloudy day now. The comparisons that we make, they are different in different cultures. You want to tell good things about her, and that's why we are saying, here in Europe you can say you are my sun, but in Indian subcontinent you will have to say you are my cloudy day, you are my cloud, or you are my rain, or something. Okay. Metaphors fall in a category of figures of speech. Is a figurative language in the form of a single word or phrase. You can use metaphors as a single word, or you can use it in a phrase. And they are those devices in language that makes language rich, interesting, creative, imaginative. Fowler in 1926 presents a list of devices of rhetoric. How many kinds of figures of speech we use in our language? Suppose somebody comes now and I tell, oh, you are right in time. I am not simply saying that you are right in time. I am being sarcastic. So there is something called sarcasm. Someone is, okay, there are 16 of them he mentions: allegory, anticlimax, cliche, euphemism, Hendiadys, prolepsis, similes, analogy, hyperbole, and metaphor. Simile is you are like a sun. Metaphor, you are a sun. So there is a small difference, but it makes a huge difference in the understanding. And in a metaphor, one concept is explained in terms of another. If I say you are good, it's a literal sentence. Good is an adjective and I am attributing it to this person. But if I am saying you are as skinny as a rail, you are a mountain. So this guy is telling this guy you are a mountain means you are heavy, you are big. I am not saying you are fat, but I am saying you are a mountain. Bad thing to say, but being polite, being metaphorical and telling this. Rail is skinny, thin line, That's why he can attribute this property to this thin man, and mountain being very big, this guy can attribute it to this fat guy. So metaphor is a queen of figurative tools. In poems, if you pick up Shakespeare or even Dante, lots of symbols and lots of metaphors are used in language, in poetry, and metaphor is used a lot. What is the structure of a metaphor? Not very different from any normal sentence. Man is a wolf, suppose, is an example, very simple example of a metaphor. So man being X and wolf being Y. X is Y. Okay? Man is the target explained in terms of the source wolf. I can say man is good, but here I am saying man is a wolf. That means all the properties of wolf I am trying to attribute it to man. What are the properties of wolf? Wolf is being cunning. You cannot trust a wolf. He is hairy. He lives in forest. Which property are we saying this to this man? This is also a matter of discussion. We will get to that. Then there are another one small division, conventional metaphors versus novel metaphors. Conventional metaphors are like this chair has 4 legs. You don't have legs in chairs, because if chairs had legs, they would have walked, because legs are for walking. But this is part of our language. Somebody used it at first time as a metaphor, and then it stayed, and then time is money. So these kind of man is a wolf, these kind of metaphors are basically part of our language, and we do not even consider them metaphorical, but they are metaphorical. So they are called conventional metaphors, and the other one is called novel metaphors. So you say, you look at a man and say, oh, he is so spiritual, he is like a cathedral, he is like a chapel, whatever you say. It's a novel metaphor, you are giving a new property. If someone comes and says, oh, what are you? I am Trump. Now again, that's a novel metaphor. You are comparing a person with Trump, President Trump. You know President Trump. And if someone says to you, you are a Trump, are you happy? Okay. So looks like that we have conventional and novel metaphors, and in a metaphor, target, and there is a source, and source properties are mapped to target. Now let's look at this example. Surgeon is a butcher. You all must have gone to a doctor, and you go to a doctor and doctor looks at you and then gives you some medicines. But if you go to a surgeon, he will do a surgery. So he will make you sleep, and then he will give you anesthesia, and then will cut your body. This action looks more like a butchery task. You cut a chicken or you cut a sheep or whatever. It's similar to what a doctor does or surgeon does. Now surgeon is a butcher, or if I say my surgeon is a butcher, is metaphorical or literal? How would you say? It's a literal? Surgeon is a butcher is a literal sentence or a metaphorical sentence? You go to a surgeon and say you are a butcher. You don't mean to say that you are a butcher. It's only one action which is the butchery that he is doing. But the point here I want to make is that this sentence in itself is not literal or metaphorical. It is in the context in which the sentence is used. So metaphors come in a context. If I really want to say that this man acts like a butcher, this surgeon acts like a butcher, then this will be a metaphorical sentence. But suppose I know a surgeon who is a surgeon in daytime and butcher at night. He has a butchery shop. It's quite possible, right? If you know that the Prime Minister of Tibet, not Tibet, Bhutan, there is a country called Bhutan, very small country in Himalayas. It's a very happy country, by the way. And the Prime Minister of that country is a Prime Minister on all weekdays, but on Sundays he is a doctor. He goes to a hospital, works as a doctor. If you say that the Prime Minister is a doctor, it could be a metaphorical sentence. That means the Prime Minister takes care of the country, he treats people very well. But if you say the same sentence in Bhutan, it would be a literal sentence, because the Prime Minister there is also a doctor who goes to a hospital on Sunday. So a sentence can be metaphorical, but can also be considered literal, considering the background and the context in which it is said. Okay? So a sentence could be considered literal or metaphorical, both. It is the interpretation which is literal, metaphorical or anomalous, not the stimulus itself. What is interpretation? Interpretation is when you read something and you try to make sense of it. I give you a sentence or a story, all of you will read it differently, trust me. All of you will get different meanings out of it, because you will read that sentence from your background, you will interpret it differently, you will understand it very differently. So interpretation is very subjective. Same surgeon is a butcher is metaphorical for one person, say being in India or in Italy or in US. Same sentence will be literal if that person lives in Bhutan. Now, the question comes, if metaphors, okay, that's fine, there are lots of metaphors, what to do with them? Why should we study them? Since you are in college, you have to study, because that's what you have come here for. And that's what theorists do. They try to understand how a metaphor is different from a literal sentence. If I say a person, you are a good person, how do I process it? How do I understand it? And if I say you are a wolf, I am saying an opposite thing. For example, again take the example, you are a bad person, you are cunning, it's rude, I don't want to tell this to this person. Instead I say you are a wolf. I am being polite probably, but how these two sentences are understood? How do we process them? So like any other domain, we have lots of models to explain how metaphors work. Let's talk about 4 of them. These 4 theories are interesting. There are other theories also, relevance theory, which is in general in linguistics, people use that, pragmatic theory, but we are not going into those theories. We will stick to these 4 theories. Number 1 is comparison theory. So when you say man is a wolf, what you are actually doing is that you are listing all the properties of man. Man walks on 2 legs, has 2 hands, 1 nose, he is a good guy, he is intelligent, he lives in society, lots of properties of man you are putting on one side, and you are also taking properties of wolf, cunning, hairy, lives in forest, eats meat, whatever. And then you compare these 2 properties. Which property can you put on man? So this process is comparison process, and the theory says that this is what we do. We look for a common property which can be attributed to both these target and source. Simple theory, doesn't make much fuss about things. So you have a man, you have a wolf, you look at these properties, find a common property and say, okay, this is a metaphor and I understand it. You agree to this theory? This is what makes sense? Very common. This is what Aristotle also says that this is what the theory is. 2000 years back, Aristotle thought about metaphors and came up with this kind of theory. But then there is another theory which says that a metaphor is a metaphor because it is anomalous. Anomalous means nonsensical. If I say a man is a cathedral, it does not make sense to me. So, if you tell me you are a cathedral, I will not understand it. Then the sentence is anomalous, nonsensical. But since you have said this, I know that you are not talking nonsense. You try to make sense. So, what do? I go back, revisit the sentence, try to understand it now metaphorically. Could there be another meaning to this? And then I say, oh yes, he wants to say that I am a very spiritual person. I don't know, nobody will tell this, but I am a spiritual person. That's when I get the metaphor. So, anomaly theory says that all metaphors are primarily nonsensical sentences, but only when they go back and then revisited, you get the metaphor. This makes sense? Which one would you agree, comparison theory or anomaly theory? Think about it. You can have multiple views also. Metaphor could be anomalous, metaphor could be could have comparison also. I will tell you about an interesting study. Anomalous theory says that when you read a sentence, you find, if it is metaphorical, you find it anomalous. So, there was this experiment with normal experiment. People were asked, read a sentence and say if this is metaphorical or anomalous or literal. You have to press the button. For literal you press 1, for metaphorical you press 2, and for anomalous you press 3. Lot of people did this experiment, and when they analyzed, they found that literal sentences took say around 2.4 seconds to understand. Metaphorical sentences took around 3.6 seconds, and anomalous is also around the same time, 3.7 or something. Now, what can we get out of this result? Can we get something out of this result? Literal sentences take 2.4 seconds, metaphorical sentences take 3.6 seconds to understand. It means that whatever you are doing in your brain, whatever you are doing in your mind, you are doing harder work to understand a metaphor, because that is why it is taking longer time. If you are taking longer time to understand something, that means it is a tough task, you are putting lots of effort, and you are putting a lot of cognitive resources that is available to you, right? So, there are some experiments to show that there is this truth to this theory. There was this another experiment which was done with brain EEG. You know, have you ever been to a hospital where you got this electrodes? It's interesting, just go sometime and put some electrodes in your head. So, there is this EEG device, electroencephalogram, and it records brain activities. So, whenever you do a task, your brain, gives some signals, it's electricity coming out, and you can measure it using these EEG devices. Some EEG devices are like 32 pins, 64 pins, 128 pins, depends. We also have one here in our lab, which is a dry one. So, you just wear it as a cap and it gives you some data, and this data comes in this form in time, and this is the magnitude of the electricity that is generated by a task. Since you are a language, communication and language students, it is interesting to know that whenever you read a sentence which has semantic problem, you know what is semantic and syntax. Semantics is related to meanings and syntax is related to the structure of the sentence. Whenever you read a sentence like whipped cream tastes anxious or I eat guitar, you don't eat guitar. Grammatically this sentence is perfect, I eat guitar, but guitar has a semantic anomaly, I cannot eat guitar. Similarly, whipped cream cannot taste anxious. So this is called semantic anomaly, and whenever you read these kind of sentences, if you put those electrodes, you will get a result something called N400. N400 is negative 400 milliseconds. So after 400 milliseconds, you will get negative spike. Similarly, there is something called syntactic manipulation. When you read a sentence which has grammatical problem, you get something called P600. Anyways, then comes interaction theory, which is most recent, and what it tells is that it's not just comparison. It takes very interesting view. Suppose you all know about MP3, right? What is MP3? Format. So it's a computer file format, but you also have something called audio video file, right? AVF. What is the difference between these two? The channel, and which one is a heavier file? Which one is a heavier file? Audio video file. MP3 is lighter file. Do you know why? It goes with this interaction theory of cognition. What it tells is that we human beings can hear only from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz, right? Anything beyond 20,000 hertz is not sound for us. Anything which is below 20 hertz again is not a sound for us. But when a microphone records, it records all kinds of wavelengths, even below 20 hertz and 20,000 hertz, and it is recording everything. It doesn't make sense that you keep that information also in a file. So what MP3 does, it trims the information from 20 to 20,000 hertz. It has a very basic principle. It means that the sound makes sense only when there is an agent, a cognitive agent. And that's where this theory comes into play and says that the sentence is not metaphorical until and unless someone comes and tries to interpret it metaphorically. Take, for example, this is a Star of David. Star of David. So it's a star, right? But you can see it as two triangles. 1, 2, 3, how many triangles? 6 triangles. It depends how you want to see it. You can see it as parallelograms. Same David star can be seen differently. Again, the point being, it's the interpretation, it's the perception that makes a difference. So metaphors are a matter of your interpretation. The last theory. Why I am telling you all these theories is just to make a ground for interesting stuff to come. I know these theories are boring sometimes, but we need to know these theories. Lakoff and Johnson came up with the latest theory, which is called conceptual theory, and says that metaphors are embedded. They are conceptual, they are not linguistic. Earlier people thought that metaphors is in language, but no, metaphors are cognitive. It's in the interaction with the agent and the stimuli. Same with interaction theory. So metaphors can be in different modalities as well. You think not in language, but you think in schemas. There are concepts, and these concepts can be represented in a word or in a painting. That's why a poet thinks and writes it in a language, but a painter thinks the same thing probably and puts it in a drawing. Same thought, but two different modalities. So implication would be that metaphors, being creative, can be in different modalities as well. Metaphors occur in different modalities, and the other one is, it's not just the language which is taking. So let's get into little interesting stuff. When we understand a language, what happens in our brain? Is it just the language area of our brain is active, or other parts of our brain area also gets activated? Usually people now come up and say that language understanding requires a lot of things. If I tell you an example. You have seen this movie called Inferno, Dan Brown? Okay. Angels and Demons? How many of you have seen? Have you read the book? Harry Potter? All of you? Okay. Some of you have read Harry Potter and then you have seen the movie also, right? Which one was better? Reading the book or watching the movie? Which is better? Watching a movie or reading the book? Huh? Reading is better in this case. Okay. Some movies, yeah, but have you read the script of those movies? No. So if you have read a book, suppose, and you also watch a movie, you will always find, say, Da Vinci Code or Inferno or Angels and Demons, Harry Potter. When you read the book, you have a better experience than when you watch a movie. And the reason is very simple. When you are reading a book, your brain is working very actively. What it is doing is, you are imagining Robert, what is his name? Professor Robert Langdon in Angels and Demons, to be someone else. You have no restriction, your imagination is open. But when you are watching a movie, you know that this person is Tom Hanks. You cannot imagine Tom Cruise. There is this limitation. This limitation is caused by the pictorial domain that you are in, but linguistic experience allows you for different kinds of imagination, which is a part of saying that when you are reading a sentence or a poem or a story, your brain area is highly activated, different parts of your brain is activated. Brain imaging shows that motor areas get activated while comprehending metaphors. For example, if I say, what do you say? Let's take 3 words, licking, picking and kicking. 3 words, lick, pick and kick. Lick is associated with which part of your body? Tongue. Pick is associated with your hands, and kick is associated with your foot. People do this experiment and find that whenever you hear a word like lick, your brain area which is associated with your tongue, not your tongue, but the brain area which is associated with tongue, gets activated. Whenever you hear a word like pick, your finger and hand area which is associated with your brain area which is associated with your hands gets activated. And how do you get these activations? You do EEG and fMRI studies. The other one, kick, you get similar, where is the foot, brain area. So this is a brain map of body parts. You have something called motor area in your brain at the center, which represents your body parts. If you move your hand, so I can do an experiment. I cut open your head and take a part, suppose this one hand, and I simulate it. I put little electricity there and your hand will move, because your brain is this hand is controlled by your this part of the brain. Metaphors, again, as we said, is creative. So when we are talking about brain, different cognitive processes, there is a distinction. Your brain is divided into two parts. One is called left side of the brain and the other one is called right hemisphere. Left hemisphere is responsible for language, mathematics, all kinds of these tasks. But right hemisphere is responsible for creative tasks. Anyone who is lefty here? You are lefty? You are also lefty? Anyone else who is lefty? Others are righty, right? I don't know if this happens in Italy also or not, but in India, if a child starts writing with left hand, family used to get worried. No, this person should start writing with his right hand. Culturally, right hand writing is considered good, left hand. But if you notice, most of the creative people and successful people are lefty. There is some debate about it, but in general, the left part of your body is controlled by right side of your brain, and right side of your body is controlled by the left side of your brain. So when you write with your left hand, your right part of your body, brain is activated, is controlling. That means you are being creative. So more creative people use their left hand, and people who use language and good at mathematics, they are with right hand. Debate, it is a debatable issue, but in general this is the assumption. So metaphors, when we are using, which part of our brain should be active? Right part, because that's the assumption people say. Metaphor is a creative task, and creativity comes from the right side of your brain. So when you understand a metaphor, right side of your brain should be active. But again, this can be debated. But as we said, gestures. Metaphors are in gesture. What does it mean? Everything. So when you come to Italy, that's the first thing you learn, right? Gestures. Gestures are very much part of our language. In Italy, you can't speak until unless you know how to do gestures. Gestures are metaphorical sometimes. Not always, but most cases gestures are metaphorical. There are four kinds of gestures: symbolic, didactic, which is called indexical also, motor, and lexical. We are interested in lexical gestures because they complement your language. So when you are saying, I fell down, open, push, pull, when you are complementing your speech with these gestures, they are complementing each other, and they are sometimes metaphorical. I'll skip these. Where do we find these gestures which are very metaphorical? In general, in language you can find. Many people say, oh, what is this? Metaphorical meaning for something that you want to say additional to what you are actually saying in words. There is a difference between sign language and gestures. Sign language is a language in itself. The gestures that we are using are not sign language. Sign language also has gestures. So gestures are different. In dance, especially those classical dances, I know about Indian dances, so that's why I put this lady from India. She is a dancer. A lot of gestures in dance is metaphorical. So this is peacock. If you search on internet, you will find a lot of gestures that represent meanings. So this gesture means peacock. You can have different. If you are interested in gestures and their metaphorical meaning, this is the example. Very interestingly, I should tell you that there is not one Buddha. There are at least 10 Buddhas. One being Gautam Buddha, which is the famous one, but there are 9 more. And each of these Buddhas has a different hand position. The other one is this one, mudra of banishing fear, concentration mudra of Amida, demon quelling mudra. 10 different Buddhas in 10 different hand gestures you will find, and people recognize Buddha in different postures. They are metaphorical. My research does not go into gestures and other things. I am a visual metaphor man. I do research on these kind of paintings, advertisements and pictures. My interest is, how do we understand these kind of images? This is a very interesting picture, right? Especially for those who smoke. Anyone smokes? If you smoke, it is good, right? Or it is bad. Many people say that if you smoke, you die. I would say, if you drink water, you die. If you breathe, you die. You eat, you die. You die anyways. So, it's a different kind of argument, but interesting argument. But you see a lot of advertisements that are metaphorical coming in from advertisements against smoking. So, how do we understand these images? A visual metaphor, also called a pictorial metaphor, occurs when the source or and target are rendered in images. If we look at the first image that we saw, you are my sun, my star, my moon, that was not a pictorial metaphor. You had a picture and somebody was saying something, so it was a linguistic metaphor. But this one is a visual metaphor in which the death, which is shown in terms of the hanging tool and the person who is smoking. So, what would a metaphor be here? Smoking kills, like hanging kills. So, hanging kills, smoking kills. No words here, no sentences here, there is no language. It is just from the image we get this metaphorical meaning. Now, visual metaphors are of two kinds: static images, paintings, advertisements, cartoons, moving images and films. We'll stop after artistic paintings and then we'll go deeper. Man Ray's painting, you know this? Very famous painting. It was a time when people were doing these surrealistic paintings. Take two non-related objects and put them together. And when you do this, you are actually creating a metaphor. Non-related things put together in image. We look at this painting and understand something. Men being dead or family being dead. I looked at the original painting. So this is the original one, and look at the surrealistic part of it, counterpart. So these three people in the same posture, they are sitting and standing. It gives you a metaphor. This is also a painting, artistic painting. The trunk of the elephant is changed with, it makes more sound. Okay. Let's look at some cartoons also where metaphors appear. Can you get this meaning? This was the time when, Tunisia, Egypt, they were having some uprising, political uprising, and this was triggered by Twitter. Tunisia government changed, Egypt government changed, and this is why popular uprising. So someone is like igniting this. So matchsticks are the countries and popular uprising is the lighter. Metaphorical relationship. So popular uprising is burning these countries. This is another very interesting cartoon where China's economy is compared with as a huge heavy truck, and growth goes towards it, the truck is going towards a place and it has a very small bridge, so it cannot cross it. So this one is very relevant to you. As I said, third year is going to be tough. Graduation selfie, this is more relevant for US students because when they go to college they take a lot of loan to study, and when they are finishing they are already in debt, so they have to pay back, and that's why this makes more sense. By the time you finish your graduation, you are already burdened by a lot of debt, a lot of money you have to pay back. I know at least in Italy you don't take loans to study, right? The college education is free, but in different countries different things happen. Okay, let's take a break of 10 minutes and then we'll come to comics and other aspects. Any questions so far you have? Is it very boring? If it is interesting, let's make it more interesting and let's ask some more questions at the end. 10 minutes. So far we have seen metaphors in language, but because conceptual metaphor theory and other brain imaging studies suggest, we assume that metaphors can happen in different modalities. Gestures, you can have smell, you can also have in touch. I don't know if you have ever felt a metaphorical touch. When you are in love, you will feel, but your mother's touch is very metaphorical. When she touches you, you get this emotional feeling, but it's normal touch. When touch also becomes metaphorical, so different modalities. We are talking about visual modalities, two kinds of them, one static and one moving. In movies, we see a lot of metaphors. In comics, let's see. Have you seen Avengers? Is there any English version running anywhere? This is an Italian version, right? The Avengers. Any English version you know in Cagliari? Avengers, where is it running? UCI cinemas? Italian version or English version? Any English version do you know? Okay, so I have to see Avengers, but Italian I won't understand much. I am looking for an English version sometime. Superman, Batman, this one is what? Who, what? Iron Man, okay. Hulk, this one is, and this is, so you know them, right? These characters are, when they are on pictures, when they are in the movie, they can do a lot of stuff. When you read comics, how their emotions, how different things are represented. This is one of the examples of a metaphor used in comics. I don't know, what does it mean? Explosion, or two people are fighting inside, right? This is an example of a metaphorical representation of fight, two people fighting very intensely. So cartoons have different ways of representing things, like someone says, "Arg, I'm angry." Oh. Facial expressions, body postures, you draw, this person is tired. By more or less conventionalized pictograms, heart, skulls, when there is a skull, it means the danger. Formal features of text, balloons and panels, and there is something called pictorial runes also. So let's see some examples. Anger, different faces. You want to show anger? Look at this. Sadness. I did one study with Tintin and Indian comics, comparing them, that how do they represent emotions. So some examples I have taken from them. Joy, happy. Fear, this person really looks, frightened. Then many times you don't play with the facial expressions, but you play with these balloons, the dialogue balloons. Text, the font that you use also gives you emotions. What kind of emotion would it be? Can you guess? Okay, let's see the other one. This one is jumping, happy. This one, little rude, angry. This one, this is dangerous, horror. There is a category which is called pictorial runes in comics. They convey motion or speed lines or emotion. So for example, take these lines. This is from Tintin. This shows that the motorcycle is in motion. So these lines are motion lines, speed lines. Movement lines, these lines, they tell you the movement. But there are some other types. These are called droplets. So these are called emotion lines. There are many of them, at least 4 or 5 of them, and they represent emotions. So you have speed lines, you have movement lines, and you have these lines. They are called pictorial runes, R-U-N-E-S, and they represent emotions also. Now let's look at these advertisements. Lot of advertisements we see every day. Facebook, Instagram is full of advertisements, and we can't get rid of them. Again, smoking. Lots of advertisements come from smoking campaign. Cigarette is like a gun. But I know I never smoked, but I know when I was young, girls like boys who smoke. They give some kind of, attitude. We had this impression, but I never tried. This is from Melting Earth, climate change. Trump thinks that there is no climate change happening. He's an intelligent guy. He can think. Importantly, he thinks. Chlorets, chewing gum. Here in this case, you have, it gives you an impression that this mouth smells a lot like a socks or fish. So if you eat chlorets, it will be better. There are many other examples we'll come across. So the question we ask is that what is a visual metaphor and how is it different from verbal metaphors? The first slide that we saw, why is it not a metaphor, visual metaphor? You have a picture, but you also had a linguistic metaphor. Verbal metaphors are different from visual metaphors. First, because of the structure of language and images, because of the processing of language and images. Two different things. Let's see. In language, you usually have, not always, but in most cases, a linguistic structure tells you there is a metaphor. Man is a wolf, surgeon is a butcher, he is a cathedral, you are a sun, you are a moon. There is a binding force. So two concepts, X and Y, is bound by is. There is a linguistic structure to it. Images, language is read from left to right, right? When you read something, you read from left to right. If you go to Arab country, you will read from right to left. In China, you can read from top to bottom also. But for images, you don't have a reading pattern. If you do an eye movement study, you will find that people look at the image like this. But language is linear. So holistic versus linear processing. There was this joke. Coke company was not doing well in Riyadh or Saudi Arabia. You know, Saudi Arabia is a country. So they hired a very great marketing person from US, and he was paid millions of dollars and said that you go to Saudi Arabia and make this Coke popularize. And this guy went there and he put up 3 pictures. One picture of a person who is very tired and not able to walk. The second picture is drinking Coke. And third picture, he is running very fast and very energetic. But the problem was that still the Coke did not work well. The sales came down. And he realized that in Saudi Arabia, people don't read from left to right. They read from right to left. So what they saw, there was a person who was very energetic, he drank Coke and he became dull. So language has a reading pattern, left to right, right to left. Images do not have that. So visual metaphors are holistic in nature. Let's take this example to give you a glimpse. You can read the words, right? One volunteer. You have done this. So one volunteer. Anyone? You just have to read. Okay. Read the words.
Purple, yellow, red, black, red, green, red, yellow, orange, blue, purple, black, red, green, orange.
Little faster.
Purple, yellow, red, black, red, green, red, yellow, orange, blue, purple, black, red, green, orange.
Perfect. Now read the color of the word.
Red, blue, green, yellow, green, black, blue, red, yellow, black, yellow, blue.
So it's, you see the difference? That's where the processing comes into play, that we have, when we are reading, we are also processing the color, but we are also processing the meaning and the words. And if they are not coherent, it becomes very difficult for us to read. If you are reading only the words, it's easy because you are just reading the words. But if you have to read the color, so you have to take the process which is processing the color, convert it into a word which already has a word. So there is a contrast. If I write red with red color, yellow with yellow color, absolutely no problem. But if there is a, this test is called Stroop test, and this shows that we process visual information different from verbal information. The text is processed differently and images are processed differently. So let's take an example, man is a wolf. If we have to find a visual counterpart of it, if we have to make a visual metaphor, how do we make it? The idea is to transfer properties of wolf on man, right? This is a metaphor. We want a visual metaphor for it. What kind of properties? Properties that are usually not associated with man, but associated with wolf. High salient properties of wolf and low salient properties of man. That's the definition. In this case, let's take cunningness of wolf is attributed to man, right? The wolf is very cunning. How do we do it? I can in language say man is a wolf because he is cunning. But how do you show cunningness in image? Cunningness is an abstract concept. You just can't show it in image. Maybe painters can paint something which says this is cunning, but again it will be very metaphorical. How to do it in image? Maybe this way we show half man and half wolf. Will this be considered a man is a wolf? Or this way, we compare a wolf and a man, put them together and say that okay, they are, man is a wolf, or like this. We merge the properties of man and wolf together and make a new picture. There are different ways in which visual metaphors can be presented. But which property to focus on is a problem. We wanted to portray or depict cunningness, but in these cases you can also say that man is a wolf because he is a hairy man. If someone has a huge beard, not you, but anyone who has huge beard and long hair can qualify as a wolf, hairy face. So it's a problem because of the structure of the language and image. But people produce visual metaphors. How do they produce? How do we identify? Now look at this image. This is an advertisement of a Band-Aid. When you are injured, little scratch and you put a tape. This looks like this is a very powerful Band-Aid. It works as if there is a huge medical emergency team arrives and then cures you. So, is this a metaphor? This one, teeth is like pearls. Is this a metaphor? Conditions for visual metaphor, there are 3 of them. One is that there have to be 2 distinct concepts. These concepts should not be related to each other. One is the source and the other is the target identified, and properties of one concept, which is source, is transferred to another, which is target. Let's apply this to these pictures. Band-Aid and a medical emergency team. Are they 2 distinct concepts? Actually, no. All belong to a domain which is called medical field. Band-Aid is a very small thing, but emergency team is on the other side of the greatness or biggerness. So, from the same domain but expanded. You are hot like a sun. I am not saying a metaphor. I am actually saying hot and sun. I am just extending the or exaggerating the property. That is the case of hyperboles. Hyperbole is not a metaphor, it is a different figure of speech. Same is here, the whiteness of teeth and whiteness of pearl. You are talking about whiteness stretched. Let us take 2 videos.
बराबर है. रेडी 1 2 स्माइल. घाघरा उठाओ. ऐसा बस. स्माइल स्माइल. होल्ड.
अब बस जी.
बेबी एक और प्लीज. रेडी 1 2 स्माइल स्माइल स्माइल. Happydent white, smile please.
So, if you eat Happydent, this is an exaggeration, not a metaphor. Let us take another example of the same category. Where did I put? Advertisements use a lot of exaggeration. So, this was the case. We can get confused sometimes that it is a metaphor or it is a different figure of speech. It also says that all that figure of speech that is available in language can be found in images and other modalities, which is interesting. Okay, so let us see different ways in which visual metaphors are found. One method is called juxtaposition. So, you put a picture here and you put a picture another one here and try. There is no property attribution, it is just 2 images put together. Take this example, a nuclear blast with the sound of guitar. Anyone who plays music will understand that the sound of guitar sometimes can be an explosion. When he came to stage and strung the guitar, it was like an explosion. A metaphor being created where you are comparing the properties of this explosion with this explosion. There is another one which is called homospatiality. This is Man Ray's painting, where he just put these two, you identify this? The violin, yeah, I don't know what is it called, but what they have done is, on the body they have put this, which is called you are putting it, merging it, and technically it is called homospatiality, where two non-composable objects are stitched together as a single image. So in this case, what would be a metaphor? This woman is like a violin. When she speaks, she is so sweet, she is so musical, something. Then there are, every time it is not possible to make, in these, there is no language involved. In this also there is no language involved. But you can also have metaphors that are multimodal, in which you also put some words to make it more, understandable. So let us take an example here. It is an advertisement of some aesthetic surgery clinic, where they say that the skin that feels like this to skin that feels like this. So this is a wrinkled skin and this is a smooth skin. In both cases, if you remove this one also, it does not make a difference. It is a pictorial. This is a monomodal visual metaphor in which both wrinkles and soft skin, both of them are represented in pictures or images. Look at this, the same meaning, skin that feels like this to skin that feels like this, soft versus wrinkled. But the wrinkleness is given in picture, but skin is written in a word. So this is a case of multimodal metaphor. Let us take some more examples, some more cases. Both concepts are explicit. This is the case of homospatial metaphors. Juxtaposition, you just put two things together. But in homospatiality, you have different varieties, different flavors, where both concepts are explicitly represented. Both of them are present. Example, this is the juxtaposition, sorry. In juxtaposition, both concepts are represented. This is another case. Bullets are like cigarette. Again, you get a lot of advertisements from cigarette campaign. Juxtaposition with context. So what you are doing is that you are not changing it. In this case, it is a simple case. A hand grenade is kept inside a bottle of beer. This is a beer bottle. So you get the meaning, this beer is very powerful. Two concepts are fused in one image. This is an advertisement of Volkswagen car. This is also another example, plier and hands. It can have a different meaning. Handmade cars or very delicately made cars, or your hands are like tools, or tools are like hands. Case 2, one concept is explicitly represented and the other is implicit. Take this example. This is an advertisement of Seco alarm clock. This picture, the context suggests that there is this person sleeping early in the morning and there is this space, his table. Usually we should expect an alarm clock. Instead we have a cactus. So the alarm clock is like a cactus because Even if you try to switch it off, it will wake you up. It is harsh. So a metaphorical meaning is coming. Alarm clock is very powerful, very nosy, it will wake you up. Similarly, in this example, the tongue is missing. Tongue is represented or replaced by a fish or a sock. Target is explicit and the source is implied. Let's take this example. I don't know if you can see this. There is this hair strand. It's an advertisement of some shampoo. So if you use this shampoo, your hair is like a shoelace which is strong. You can use this as a. Now this is an interesting one. Do you see this in bathroom? This kind of shape? Can you relate it with something in the bathroom? Huh? The toothpaste. So when toothpaste is getting over, you try to turn it and take things out. The shape represents a toothpaste, and toothpastes are usually associated with freshness. So early morning you wake up, the first thing you do, freshen up, do the toothpaste. This water is as fresh. So freshness. So in this case, you see what is happening. The toothpaste is not given, it's only imagined, but we get the meaning. This is an interesting example. I have shown it to many different cultures. This is very specific culture specific advertisement. Look at here, plant more trees. This is an example of WWF, World Wild Federation. And anyone who has lived in India or Sri Lanka or that part, even Indonesia, they will understand the meaning, the Asian part. But can you get the meaning out of it? Women going around an electric pole, what's happening? Can you get the meaning? How is it related with trees, plant more trees? The custom in Indian system is that women usually go around a tree for a worship. When they are doing a worshipping, they go around a tree. These small symbols are also very religious symbols. So this is a procession usually, and so if there is no tree, what will you do? Will you go around an electric pole? So it's a sarcastic metaphorical meaning where you are replacing a tree with an electric pole. Many people came up with an alternative interpretation that tree is considered God in India. So electric pole, which is the representation of science, so science is God, that kind of meaning can also be extracted from here. Okay. Let's get little deeper into it, not much. We have seen these examples, right? Especially this case. What is so important and interesting about this example is that the water is fresh and freshness is coming from toothpaste. How do we get toothpaste here? And that is coming because there is a shape which is similar to toothpaste. So that's where we ask how this similarity at perceptual level plays a role in metaphors, visual metaphors. If you take another example, I'll show you. If you see the shape of this is similar to tongue, shape of this is very similar to an alarm clock, shape of this hand, similar to the actual tool, this similar to shape. This one is making sense because there is a similarity in shape, right? So the question would be, what role does it play? Let's take an example of her waist is like an hourglass. So in linguistic metaphors also people have spoken about it, that a metaphor becomes interesting if there is a similarity at perceptual level. It's not just comparison, it's not just interaction, similarity. Look at this. Her waist is like an hourglass. You can understand this only if you know the shape of the hourglass. So it's basically a poem where a man says about his wife that my wife's waist is like an hourglass, so she is beautiful. I don't know how this shape is beautiful. So we did an interesting experiment, I should mention this. You know Google image search? You want to have so when you search on Google you get images, right? There is a big problem still that if you have an image and you want an exact image or want the meaning of this image, how do you get the meaning? So these days Google has this image search. So you upload an image and it will show you similar images, right? What Google does is that they have lots of data, so they can do it now. You compare the properties here, perceptual properties like color, shape, texture, orientation and other properties, brightness, shade, contrast, and look for a similar image which has the similar properties. But it is quite possible that these two images may look similar, but they are different conceptually. So take this example. We had a system like that before, like 9 years back, when Google was not ready with their image search. So there was a big, competition that who will come up with a good image search system based on the perceptual features. So one of these systems was, you put this as an input image, the system gave you this. According to system, these two are similar, but they are not similar actually. When human being sees these two things, this is a rising sun and this is an apple, maybe apple, yes, doesn't look same. It looks same, but it's not same. There is a very famous movie actor in India. When we gave this input in the system, it gave us this result. So similar to this. But if you see that they are two different people, do two different things, a man and a horse, but the posture in which he is standing and the horse posture is similar. So it's the perceptual similarity which is being measured. This one, helicopter and a tree, this system will fail for practical purposes. If you want a similar image, you put this and say, give me a similar image, and the system gives you this, then the system is wrong, right? But what actually the system is doing is, it's just measuring the perceptual properties, the shape, color, texture, which is there. This was the worst case. You put this woman who is a Miss World, and this is the result, a buffalo. How a system recognizes this as same? Maybe the black patch here and the black patch here, it has some algorithm. Similarly here, this building, Taj Mahal, and this is what we got. What system does is that it is looking for similarity at perceptual level, and our understanding or the research in visual metaphors, what we are saying is that a visual metaphor works better if the similarity is perceptual, not just conceptual similarity. This is one of the studies that we did, was when people see similar pairs. Now this was the result from that system. A question will come that if you take two things and say they are conceptually different, but are they perceptually similar? How do we measure the perceptual similarity? The reason is we take almost like 120 milliseconds to process this color, shape, texture from our eyes, the data which is coming, and then we identify the object. It's very, very inherent, it's very subconscious. We don't recognize. When you look at this table or chair, you don't say, okay, there is a blue patch and then there is this shape, okay, together we make it as a chair. No, you see it as a chair. Very fast processing. We just looked at things. So we presented people two pairs, one pair which is similar according to that system and one pair which is not similar according to that system, and we said perceptual similarity, and people were asked, can you identify a metaphor? You see, this is a result of eye movement. Eye movement, people very carefully examine and compare these two images point wise. In this case, the comparison is not equal. So looks like when people look at two images and want to interpret it metaphorically, they look at the similarity, perceptual similarity. And then we came up with a model. I'll skip that. Now I have 5 to 7 more minutes. We have talked about static images, images that are not moving. What about moving images? Do we have metaphors there? Yes, we have. I'll show you 2 videos. This is the case of juxtaposition. You remember 2 things put together. You see, this is a comparison, sheep as herd going mindlessly, men also going mindlessly. The other one is interesting. So Charlie Chaplin is hungry and he is cooking.
And here it was, Thanksgiving Day. Nevertheless, there was something to be thankful for.
And he is cooking his shoes.
Not quite done yet, said the little fellow. Give it 2 more minutes. Come on, said Big Jim.
Goes on. So you saw how one case was juxtaposition, where 2 things are presented together, and the other was case of homospatiality. So the shoes looks like fish because it has, things, and laces look like spaghetti when he is eating. There are metaphors in visual modality. Last stuff. What about other tropes? We talked about hyperboles and others like simile. Let's look at some of them and then we'll end. This is a hyperbole example from advertisement. It's a hand wash. So they say that even if you wash your hands, it's still full of germs and bacteria. So exaggerated. Simile. So usually involves the comparison of one thing with another thing of a different kind, quick and slow. This is also a kind of simile. You know, vacuum cleaner, and then there is this Fructus Garnier shampoo. It cleans, both of them. So this cleans like a vacuum cleaner. A metaphoric term is used to fill in a gap in the lexicon. He fell in love, no word for he became in love. So this fell in love does not mean that you are actually falling in love like a pit. Allegory, allusion, story actually about one set of events presented as though occurring elsewhere to other people. So it's a Last Supper scene differently represented in a different scenario. It's more of a American dinner. Euphemism is used when some decorum term indirectly related to an object with social sensitive connotations. If you go to Vatican, all the male statues, they have these fig leaves. It was done sometime in 17th or 18th century, like David also. I'm not sure whether David has a fig leaf or not. But things that you don't want to say, but you present it very nicely. Metonymy, the substitution of the name of an attribute or adjunct for that of the thing meant. Does it represent something? Think. Same is like synecdoche, a figure of speech in which a part is made to represent the whole or vice versa. So tomato, ketchup bottle is made with tomato. Oxymoron is the attribution of incompatible traits to an object. Sharp dullness of a professor. So sharp and dullness together does not go. What do we mean by sharp and dullness together? In this case, Colgate's strong teeth, and this guy does not have. Persiflage is one of them, is irresponsibility in the sense of treating the serious with levity and the trivial with grandeur. He failed perfectly. Now, failed is a negative thing, but you are, making it interesting. So these are some Indian gods, but they are riding bicycle, triviality. One thing that we use a lot is personification, is the treating of an object as a person. Mobile phones talking to each other. This is Toy Story, right? And this is the last one. Prolepsis, also known as anticipation, is a metaphor involving time in a particular way. Oh, you came and I am dead. Many times we say I am dead. I don't mean that I am dead. I mean that I am anticipating something which is going to be in future and representing it now. So this is one of the case of visual representation of that kind of structure. Okay. I'm done, 4 o'clock. If you have any questions, ask. The idea was to show how metaphors are not only linguistic, but they also appear in different modalities, gestures, images, and we've primarily focused on visual aspect. Touch, smell, and sound is one domain where metaphors are not studied much. We don't have much of studies on tactile and smell and taste, but it's an open field. If you are interested, you can get into that research and find metaphors that appear in different other modalities. Visual modality was this. Lots of other issues we have, but for this introduction class, it's enough. No questions? Was it okay? Did you get something? Then it's fine. Thank you very much. Thank you.